India, because I am before the highest court of the
Yes,
country.
no, my lord, remorse.
And I object, my lord, he must say that I strongly oppose terrorism and secessionism in Jammu and Kashmir. The learned AG is here.
Somebody record us. It's not the newspaper alone. It's a, and not only within on the floor of the house, he reiterates outside the. I stand by it. It's not that the newspaper barely carried it out and
we have media reports that he said exception is not complete.
It's a part.
It's not complete at all. He has said so many other things.
Since he's invoking Constitution of India, then he can't stand outside the Constitution of India also.
All right, we got your
I'm
point.
grateful. Matter of propriety, I'm grateful.
There must be some reports that they are
Not remorse, my lord. He must say that I oppose and object to terrorism and any secessionist activity by Pakistan in Jammu and Kashmir or elsewhere. It must come on record, my lord.
He is a petitioner in which petition?
My lord, in the lead petition, my lord, but for your lordship's decision that it would be titled as Ray Article 70, he would have been the main petitioner.
Main petitioner, 1037 of 2019.
Shah Faisal, my lord, after withdrawal, he's the next.
Muhammad Akbar
And he's not an ordinary man, my lord, he's a member of parliament.
Written
And,
petition
when he made this
1037, right?
1037 of 2019, titled, my lord, Muhammad Akbar loan and another also during the opinion. And others. I'm grateful. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Giri.
Because I have requested your lordship that I'll give a note not mentioning the paragraphs of IR follow.
Yes,
I have circulated.
you have circulated that one. All right.
Also drawing attention to a speech of Sardar Patel where he says democracy alone is not in alliance with dynasty.
May it please you, Lord. Lord, now. Just one submission, Lord. Somebody comes before the highest court of the land, for the Constitution bench of the Supreme Court, challenges, my Lord, presidential orders, prays for several other comprehensive reliefs. And, my Lord, he doesn't apologize to your Lordship, that if he has made that statement, my Lord, his submission should be taken into account. Only if he apologizes before his Lordship. Puts it on affidavit. There's one.
We'll put it to Mr.
Yes,
Counsel
yes.
when the rejoinder is
Yes.
called out.
Yes.
It's not
Not as.
for the court. Despite it being brought to the notice of the court, if he does nothing, it might encourage others. The efforts of the nation to bring in normalcy, which is substantially not successful, might be affected. And coming from responsible leaders, it has its own context and it has its own seriousness.
Yes, Mr.
Yes. No, my lords, the one aspect on federalism, my lord, which has, I believe, my lord, trying to present a facet before your lordships, which obviously your lordships would have been taken through earlier, but just one aspect of it, my lord, in the context of abrogation of 370, my lord, if your lordships could kindly come to some portions, my lord, of the opening remarks of Dr. Ambedkar, volume 8. Both the opening remarks and the closing remarks, my lord, are at volume 8 of the
Volume 8 of
convenience
what?
compilation of documents. PDF page 5. By the way, my lord, the opening remarks presenting the draft constitution was made by Dr. Ambedkar on 4/11/1948. And my lord, the closing remarks came after the constitution was drafted on 25/11/1949. But if your lordships kindly come to PDF page 5, my lord, the paragraphs which begin, or just a short paragraph in between. So far, I have explained the form of government under the draft constitution. I will now turn to the other question, namely the form of the constitution.
Very famous speech, very famous extract from Dr. Ambedkar's, yes.
Lord, sir, one reads it again and again, Lord, and one is astounded by the vision of this great man. Two principal forms of the constitution are known to history. One is called unitary and the other federal. The two essential characteristics of a unitary constitution are the supremacy of the central polity and the absence of subsidiary sovereign polities. Contrariwise, a federal constitution is marked by the existence of a central polity and subsidiary polities side by side, and by each being sovereign in the field assigned to it. In other words, federation means the establishment of a dual polity. The draft constitution is a federal constitution as much as it established what may be called a dual polity. This dual polity under the proposed constitution will consist of the union at the center and the states of the periphery, each endowed with sovereign powers to be exercised in the field assigned to them, respectively by the constitution. The dual polity resembles the American constitution. The American polity is also a dual polity. One of it is known as the federal government, and the other states which correspond respectively to the union government and the states government of the draft constitution. Under the American constitution, the federal government is not a mere league of the states, nor are the states administrative units or agencies of the federal government. In the same way, the Indian constitution proposed in the draft constitution not a league of states, nor are the states administrative units or agencies of the union government. Here, however, the similarities between the Indian and the American constitution and the differences that distinguish them are more fundamental and glaring than the similarities between the two. The points of difference between the American Federation and the Indian Federation are mainly two. In the USA, this dual polity is followed by a dual citizenship. In the USA, there is a citizenship of the USA, but there is also a citizenship of the state. No doubt the rigors of this double citizenship are much assuaged by the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which prohibits the states from taking away the rights, privileges, and immunities of the citizen of the United States. At the same time, as pointed out by Mr. William Anderson, in certain political matters, including the right to vote and to hold public office, states may and do discriminate in favor of their own citizens. This favoritism goes even farther in many cases. Thus, to obtain employment in the service of a state or local government, one is in most places required to be a local resident or citizen. Similarly, in the licensing of the persons for the practice of such public professions as law and medicine, residence or citizenship in the state is frequently required. And in business where public regulation must necessarily be strict, as in the sale of liquor and of stocks and bonds, similar requirements have been upheld. Each state has also certain rights in its own domain that it holds for the special advantage of its own citizens. Thus, wild game and fish in a sense belong to the state. It is customary for the states to charge higher hunting and fishing license to non-residents than its own citizens. The states also charge non-residents higher tuition in state colleges.
You can skip that.
I'll skip that.
And you can
the proposed Indian constitution.
Page 8, internal page, PDF page 7.
Yes, Mr.
The proposed Indian constitution
is a dual polity with a single citizenship. There is only one citizenship for the whole of India.
Then another very important thing which Dr. Ambedkar makes a pointed reference to, if you look at page 8 top, the position in the US,
yes,
each state in America is free to make its own constitution,
correct,
and therefore the power of altering.
That's right.
And then what Dr. Ambedkar says, Babasaheb says thereafter at page 8,
yes,
is this is not true of
the proposed Indian.
Just read that para, I think that is concluded.
This is not true of the proposed Indian constitution. No states, at any rate those in part 1, model part 1 as it was originally envisaged, because under the Indian Independence Act, my lord, under section 6. But then that underwent a change, my lord, when it came to the final remarks, have a right to frame its own constitution. The constitution of the union and of the states is a single frame from which neither can get out and within which they must work. So far, I have drawn attention to the difference between the American Federation and the proposed Indian Federation. But there are some other special features of the proposed Indian Federation which mark it off not only from the American Federation, but from all other federations. All federal systems, including the American, are placed in a tight mold of federalism. No matter what the circumstances, it cannot change its form and shape. It can never be unitary. On the other hand, the draft constitution can be both unitary as well as federal according to the requirements of time and circumstances. In normal times, it is framed to work as a federal system, but in times of war, it is so designed as to make it work as though it was a unitary system. Once the president issues a proclamation which he is authorized to do under the provisions of Article 275, my lord, it must have become 356 later, the whole scene can become transformed and the state becomes a unitary state. The union under the proclamation can claim, if it wants, the power to legislate upon any subject, even though it may be in the state list, the power to give directions to the states as to how they should exercise their executive authority in matters which are within their charge, the power to vest authority for any purpose in any officer, and the power to suspend the financial provisions of the Constitution. Such a power of converting itself into a unitary state, no federation possesses. This is one point of difference between the federation proposed in the draft Constitution and all other federations we know of. This is not the only difference between the proposed Indian Federation and other federations. Federalism is described as a weak, if not effete, form of government. There are two weaknesses from which federation is alleged to suffer. One is rigidity and the other is legalism. That these faults are inherent in federalism, there can be no dispute. A federal constitution cannot but be a written constitution, and a written constitution must necessarily be a rigid constitution. A federal constitution means division of the sovereignty by no less a sanction than that of the law of the constitution between the federal government and the states, with two necessary consequences. One, that any invasion by the federal government in the field assigned to the states and vice versa is a breach of the constitution, and such breach is justiciable matter to be determined by the judiciary alone. This being the nature of federalism, a federal constitution has been found in a pronounced form in the Constitution of the United States of America. Countries which have adopted federalism at a later date have attempted to reduce the disadvantages following from the rigidity and legalism which are inherent there. The example of Australia may well be referred to in this matter. The Australian Constitution has adopted the following means to make its federation less rigid. Then, my lords, in coming to, my lords, the last paragraph beginning there, in assuaging the